So I think I froze up in the middle of what I was saying, but trespass and nuisance historically was a pretty effective way of assigning rights and reducing transaction costs. Basically, we all knew who the right holder was going to be. Now, one of the things that comes along later in the United States is the Environmental Protection Agency. And the EPA says, look, you all, right, basically you can pollute up to a certain amount. And people say, no, but that's really harming me. It's crossing into my property and it's creating a nuisance. It's reducing the value of my property. And the EPA says, well, it's okay. And the court said, look, if you're right, the EPA and legislative fiat trumped this legal doctrine. And so you end up with cities, I think it was Atlanta, ends up, rather than building a sewage treatment facility, they said it's a lot cheaper to just pollute and pay the fine. So they end up engaging in a huge amount of pollution because it was the fines that the EPA was charging were far less than what it was going to take to address the issue. Now, if what the EPA was charging was actually the cost to society as a result of this, there wouldn't be a problem. That would be what we would want. But in this case, the EPA basically just said, here's the fine. Anyways, the key here is we could spend, and I actually am slated to teach in the spring of next year. We'll see what happens between now and then. I'm slated to teach an environmental economics course. So if you're interested in this, we would spend the semester digging in to what the issues are and how we might address those issues and some of the law and economics involved. But the key here is there are ways in which we can change the rights. Now, maybe here, if property rights, if transaction costs are really too high, we might want to try and use quasi-market methods to reduce the transaction costs, things like pollution taxes or tradable permits. So I can finish this arguably fairly long section. We'll see how long it takes us to get through this. I think since we don't actually have class this coming Friday, and again, because I think we have spring mini break, I'm probably willing to spend some time talking with some of you if you want to, but this will be due the following Monday. Basically, it's a little bit longer, but I think we can get through it. So some basic. So these are major strategies, and we don't want to forget these two. It's just the idea is going to be that it's going to be hard to have social coordination at a large group level with just those two. So principles here that you could take away beyond these things. Hopefully you could walk away with the idea that demand is not completely inelastic for any good, including environmental quality. In other words, there is an optimal amount of use of the environment and trade-offs exist. So that's one thing. Demand is not completely inelastic. There are substitutes for everything, including environmental quality. Turns out environmental quality, by the way, is what we would call a normal good. As incomes, well, it's a normal good past a certain point. But in the range in which Americans are operating, it is a normal good. Incomes go up and people demand better environmental quality. So one is that demand is not completely inelastic. The other one, second one, would be to leave people as much freedom as possible in adapting. We would want to avoid what is termed command and control, mandating specific technologies or specific ways of reducing pollution or reducing the harm. Because we would like to unleash the entrepreneurial function and the innovation of lots of people. Let's put some money on the table and let those who are better able to adapt get it, because we as a society will be better off. Third point is that stable property rights enhance competition. Even if we have bad rules, if they are stable and clear, they will allow people to negotiate around them. There, we could look at the optimal rule creation. We could look at some of these things, but stable rules are pretty important. Clear, transparent, hopefully transferable property rights are going to be important. And again, then fourth point I overly anticipated here, which is that economic growth is compatible with environmental quality. In other words, environmental quality is a normal good. Thus concludes the discussion, or at least the lecture part. Hopefully this leads to more discussion of spillovers. Before I forget, if any of you are particularly interested in this and the class in the spring doesn't work for you or it doesn't happen and you want to learn more about it, you can let me know. Every spring, the think tank sends out, or at least they have historically, they run a student seminar in the summer for a week covering these issues. It's a really neat opportunity, and some of you might want to think about doing it. All right, that will do it for